Devin, can you believe it? We're here already. We've been posting about this event on social media, trying to get people excited to flex some superpowers, and we're finally here. You ready to go?
I think I'm ready to go. And my goodness, look at all these people.
Not sure if you got to the gym this morning or if you just been flying around, saving the world, flexing your superpowers, but a super exciting moment for us today here at Learner Center Collaborative. Excited to share the space with you. We're here for the flex your superpowers as we share some strategies and approaches around engaging your stakeholders. So if you're ready to jump it off, let's jump in and get going. Today's discussion is going to be super high energy, rapid fire. We're going to have some very good content for you. Hopefully some strategies you can walk away with. We call those superpowers, but hopefully you can walk away with some practical things you can take back to your practice and use in your everyday engagement with your stakeholders. At the end of the time, we're going to have some conversation with you around a poll, just kind of pick your brain a little bit about which strategy you feel really speak to you, and then drop some questions in the chat throughout the webinar, because Batman and Robin, aka Devin and Marlon, super duo team here. We're going to answer some questions at the end and just try to extend the conversation a little bit longer. So without further delay, let's get some introductions going here. I'm going to pass it over to Batman to kick it off and welcome everybody to the webinar. Devin.
All right. Thank you, Marlon. So hello, everybody. I'm Devin Vodicka. I'm the CEO of Learner Centered Collaborative, coming to you from Oceanside, which is in San Diego County, California. Really excited about this conversation, especially to be able to share some of the insights from my time as superintendent. For those that don't know, I was superintendent of Vista Unified School District here in San Diego County prior to my current role, and really excited to be joined by my super hero colleague, Marlon Stiles, and Marlon will tell you a little bit about himself.
Great to meet everybody. Excited to share space with you again. Marlon Stiles, and the proud partner at Learner Center Collaborative. Just about 4 weeks ago, I was a superintendent for the last 6 years in Middletown City Schools in Southwest Ohio. Been an educator for life. Super excited to share some space with you today, just to talk really in depth about strategies to engage your stakeholders. So what we'd like to do right now, if we go to the next slide, please, we want to hear from you, Devin. I want to kick this off to you, and I'm going to ask you a very quick, as you think about this, in the chat, if you could drop in what your superpower is, right? When it comes to you specifically as a leader, as an educator, if you could change leadership superpowers, what's one, right? Pick one for yourself. Drop it in the chat. Devin, I'm going to give you a little bit of heads up here. In just a moment, we're going to come to you and ask you a similar question to share one of your superpowers as we dig into this conversation around engaging stakeholders. So let's see what's on your mind when it comes to superpowers. We've got a connector in there. Does that sound familiar? Connector? Heard that several times before. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. Well, our relationships. And Andre from Encinitas, thanks for being here. And David from Kentucky, great. Oh, these are great superpowers.
Yeah, you could feel some very strong learner-centered mindsets in there, right? Let's convene people, have some conversation, and make some magical things happen.
That's right. You know, Marlon, anytime I take one of these self-assessments, one of the things that shows up as a superpower for me is I'm very futuristic. I like to kind of see what's around the corner. And it's great to see so many other superpowers being dropped in the chat from all of these learner-centered leaders that have joined us today.
I love what Dr. Fisher put in the chat as well, courage. Right? If we're going to create conditions for kids that they need to match their aspirations, we've got to have the courage as adults, right, to change our behaviors to make that happen. Great to see you, Dr. Fish. Great. Thank you for dropping in some of those superpowers. Really enjoyed what you put in the chat there. We're going to move the conversation along here and jump right in. Right off the bat, again, I don't know who's Batman, don't know who's Robin, but the question here is around engaging stakeholders effectively, which is going to be our conversation today. So what I'd like to do, Devin, if you are ready to go, let's talk about one superpower. What would you drop?
Yeah, I would go back to that futuristic strength that I have, and I would say I tend to see trends coming, which helps me to be half a step ahead of all the excitement in a particular community. So yeah, my futuristic tendencies would definitely be one of my strengths as a superhero. What about you, Marlon?
Oh, I think I got the gift of gab, right? I probably talk way too much, but it's the energy and the passion around communicating, right? Can you say something to inspire people to really stand and united around whatever that cause may be? So I like to build clarity through conversation, clarity through communication, because wonderful things can happen when everyone's on the exact same page. I don't know if that's a superpower, but it's yielded me good success here in my career, and excited to share some thoughts with you today. Devin, I'm gonna turn it over to you to take it from here for just a few
All
moments.
right. Love it. Yeah. So we're going to be talking about superpowers today, flexing these leadership superpowers. And, when you have powers, you can use them for good or you can use them for something not so good. And we want to encourage you to, be a little more like Batman and think about all the tools and resources and assets that you have and how you can use them to serve others effectively. What we don't want is, to be jokers who are serving our own agendas. So we're going to be talking about engaging stakeholders effectively in some flexes that we found to be quite effective. Let's go ahead to the next slide. So first off, it's important to identify what do we mean when we say stakeholders. It's a term that's thrown around a lot, but really we mean anyone who's in your learning community. Students, of course, are a primary stakeholder, and we'll talk about some ways that we can make sure that we're really centering everything that we do around what is best for each and every learner. But in your learning community, there are lots of other stakeholders that we need to be thinking about. Your staff, of course, your teachers, your administrators, your counselors, your classified staff, all make such a huge difference each and every day. And outside of schools, we have, of course, families, we have businesses, we have higher education, we have early education, we have community leaders. So we want to be thinking broadly about who is a stakeholder as we think about flexing these superpowers. Let's go to the next slide. In our work at Learner-Centered Collaborative, and we're a national nonprofit, we partner with about 150 school systems across the United States. We often talk about a theory of change, and this theory of change really begins with clarity of your vision, your mission, your values, aligning your success indicators with that, your goals, your learner profile, making sure that your learning model is also aligned with those outcomes that you're trying to achieve. And then you get into the implementation process, learning cycles to scale those things that are most impactful for learners. And at the bottom of this, the foundation is really a guiding coalition, which should represent the diversity of the stakeholders in your community. And a lot of times when we think about complex change, we forget about the importance of that guiding coalition. And we'll be talking about that a bit today. That's okay. We'll go to the next one. Do also want to recognize that there are a lot of different elements that go into transformational complex change in communities. So this is another way of thinking about the visual that we just shared and the importance of each of these, the vision, progress measures, the learning model, the social capital, the trust, the culture that you have, and then your ability to build talent in your community. And when you have all of those things together, you get to that meaningful impact. And if you're missing one or more of these, you can end up with confusion or anxiety or pockets of success. And we know that this process is very, very complex. So we could talk for days about all of the different elements that go into this comprehensive, complex change process. But today we're going to give you some really actionable, tangible actions that will help you to make progress in the direction of your vision, achieve your goals, actualize your learning model, build that social capital, and build the talent in your community. We'll go to the next slide. So a few foundational pieces that are just essential if you want to be a learner-centered leader. First, you have to listen to your learners. And that involves, of course, taking time to have conversations with them, but surveys, other ways of getting input from your students are really, really critical. If we want them to see, own, and drive their learning, they have to be involved at every stage of the journey. And it's really important to have lots of good systems for getting input from your stakeholders. It's also important to be able to share those out transparently, whether that's in communication, websites, social media. There are lots of different ways of getting that message out. But as a leader, you want to be a conduit for input, and you want to be sharing that out in a way that is transparent, open, and honest. And by doing that, you really help to elevate and empower all voices in your community. And just a suggestion around that is sometimes we want to promote the sense of anticipation, like get people excited about what's coming next. But really the goal of this empowerment and communication and listening is to build understanding so that we have shared context. And that transparency of the process, you will find, really builds excitement about what is ahead if you are open and clear. And as we talked about, a guiding coalition to support change management is really, really important. And it's really critical that that guiding coalition represents the wonderful diversity that exists in every learning community. So we're going to take those as kind of foundational, a given in this, and then we're going to talk about some flexes that are going to help you to be even more effective. And to lead us off, it's going to be Marlon. Take it away, Marlon.
Yes, let's flex some leadership principles here. Again, strategies that you might be able to consider taking back to your school districts, or even really contributing in the chat around some concepts and strategies approach you're using with things similar to this. So we'll take a few moments and share something that I've used in the past, this idea of a ride along, right? Taking road trips throughout your district, throughout your school community, and really taking time to get connected with your stakeholders, to do exactly what Crystal Bassett said in the chat, which is listen. This is all about collecting input, all about engaging folks in conversation, and really finding ways to open up not just feedback loops, but conversation loops to really set the stage for where you're going in the future. So as you think about ride-alongs, all this simply is getting out and about to kind of document a conversation with your school community in different settings. As you think about this, think about different ways to value relationships, value voices, while amplifying them at the exact same time. As you work with your PR departments, or if you don't have a PR team, think about how you can make this part of your communication plan, your comprehensive communication plan, where you get out, you create these spaces throughout your community, whether this is at a Friday night football game, at a tailgate, if this is in the living room of one of the families in your school community, sitting on a couch, having conversation. If this is during an in-service day where you're sitting on a picnic table with 2 staff members, just having conversation about where the district is heading, what's happening, the conditions that are in place for students, and how is the school system functioning, right? Great opportunity for you as a school leader to gain some insight and some input from key folks. What I would encourage you to do is think about really diversifying the voices, right? I'm not just talking about demographically, but really think about who you're going to engage in conversation and make sure it is all across the spectrum. So you think about road trips, right? Take a video crew with you, right? Document the experience, capture it in video. If you want it to be polished up and branded, great, fantastic. But once you finish documenting the conversations in those road trips, push it out to your community, right? This should be a transparent conversation that the entire school community should be able to see and hear to make sure that they understand the different mindsets and ideas and thoughts that are on people's minds. Also think about how you could leverage this to really gain some conversation and insight from folks around very strategic key focus points around whatever is on your list of priorities at the time, whether that be short-term or long-term. Really try to hone in on what the key focal points are. I would encourage you to think about just 3 at a max. That way you can really intensify the conversation around those areas. And then think about how you're going to bring that conversation back and offer it to everyone. And last but not least, this is a celebration, right? Anytime you engage stakeholders in conversation and you capture that moment, this is a celebration. So leverage the conversation, leverage the dialogue, and consider it an investment in your culture, right? Share this with the masses and make sure that you keep the conversation going as you travel across your school district on a road trip to engage in conversation. When you get in your car, we call it a ride along. There'll be some links in the chat if you want to see some examples. Reach out to us here at Learner Center Collaborative. Would love to help you think of some ideas about collecting some feedback around this particular strategy. Devin, I'm not sure if that got you fired up or not, but I know you've got some ideas around another superpower that you want to share.
Yeah, love it, Marlon. Love that, leadership happens outside of the office in a lot of ways, and really believe in that power of proximity and being close with one another to develop relationships. And as you do that, it's also really, really important that you're clear about your goals. And I think it's Yogi Berra who says, if you don't know where you're going, you're not going to get there. And on the next slide, you see that that's basically the case as an organization, that, without transparency, without knowing where you're headed, it's very difficult to be successful. You can go ahead and advance, Naomi, to the next slide. And having clarity of goals is really critical. As I mentioned, we have the privilege of working with schools across the country. It is really amazing how many times we walk around and we ask people what they're trying to achieve, and you hear lots of different answers. And that creates misalignment. It creates a lack of clarity around what success means. And there's a lot of research that says that when you have a shared definition of success, you're much more likely to be effective. Organizations in all sectors are more effective if they have clear goals. And on the next slide, we think about that, in the form of something like a scorecard. So how can you make those goals really clear and accessible to your entire community? And how can you make that a point of reference for ongoing conversations to know if you're really making progress in the direction of your aspirations? During the pandemic, we saw a lot of school systems also wondering, how do they set sort of appropriate goals in the context of a lot of change? And there are great frameworks like Maslow's hierarchy and others that can really help you think about establishing goals in a way that resonates with your community. And the more connected you are with your community, doing things like ride along, the better sense you're going to have of how to set those goals in a way that really builds that collective action. On the next slide, we have a few suggestions about how to do that. One is always go back to your vision, your mission, your values. Your goals should directly reflect what you're trying to achieve. There are, of course, some time-honored principles. Make sure those goals are measurable, time-bound, and really try to minimize the number of goals. If you have too many goals, it doesn't create that sense of clarity around what you're trying to achieve. And if you have to have quite a few goals for whatever reason, think about putting them into priority categories to help people understand what are the things that are most important. Another thing that we hear with a lot of our partners is they will say things like, we're valuing creativity or we're valuing collaboration, but we don't have metrics around those. Well, if that's the case, you can make your goal to create a baseline metric to find out what can you access that's going to give you insights into the level of student performance in those particular areas. So don't be constrained by what you don't have, and really think about how you can collect the information that's going to best serve what you're trying to achieve in your community. And the last point on this one is those goals can be as clear as you want, but if you don't review them regularly, they might as well not exist. And having routine conversations where you're reviewing progress, helping people to understand whether you're moving in the direction of what you're trying to achieve is really, really, really critical. And spend the most time, the most intensity on those goals at the top of your list, ones that you've placed in the highest priority category, so that you're aligning your efforts with what you really want to see happen for your learners. So clarity of goals is a really important flex that any leader can implement in their community. Marlon's going to take us through the next one. Take it away, Marlon.
Yeah, Devin, I'm excited about this idea of goals and having those priority goals and your framework for the future really be your flagship, your North Star. I'm going to share this next superpower being inspired by Jennifer Lampkins, who says we should consider leading by walking around. So Jennifer, I love that concept, but I want to share this idea of pulse checks. Pulse checks is a way for us to get out of our office and go get a sense of feel, some oversight, an idea of how things are going around exactly what Devin just talked about: our goals, our North Star, our framework for the future, our priorities, what outcomes that we're pursuing. I want you to think about pulse checks as something that you have to be very intentional about your behaviors, to consider doing these out and about in the school community. Yes, inside the walls of the school, but also out as you're out and about in the community in which you serve. Pulse checks. These are 5-minute interactions with different folks throughout your school community. And we're just asking 3 questions. As you think about a specific goal area that Devin mentioned before, pick one, and be very intentional about going out to collect different input from different folks out in your school community. I encourage you to think about having your executive teams conduct these pulse checks in unison with you. I encourage you to have your leadership teams in the building and conduct the pulse checks with you. Can you go back to that previous slide for just a second? Pulse checks as we're all going out as a team, as a learner-centered team, to go out and ask 3 very direct questions around a goal priority area from our framework for the future. We're collecting that information. This is not a formal process, right? This is a very authentic way to just have conversation with folks. As Jennifer said, we're out walking around and leading in the chat. We're asking these specific questions, and they're targeted specifically around a goal area that you've identified previously. This is about volume, right? And this is not about frequency. This is about volume and intentionality. So really calibrate your team around the priority that you really want to dig into. Calibrate the team on the target question that you're really trying to gain some insight from different stakeholders with, and then collect that information. And then that comes back to the team. Next slide. As you're digging into the conversation, right? I want to encourage you to think about this. That lanyard that we wear that has our pretty picture on it from picture day, that where we've got the nice head posed the right way for the camera angle, take that thing off. As you really want to relate to folks, this cannot be about position or title or a power piece, right? We want to feel very connected and inviting to those that we're talking about. So take that badge off. Hopefully you built some relationships, some strong, authentic relationships previously. So as you engage in dialogue, people feel comfortable having conversation with you and give you some real, genuine feedback. This is a leadership behavior, right? This is a practice. This is a behavior. Think about this being what we call an all the time behavior. Not some of the time are we going to get out and about from our offices and go out and about and talk to folks. This is intentional, and this is an all the time behavior to where we're doing this strategically to help drive our conversation towards the goal outcomes that we have set. Think about when you calibrate as a team post-pulse check, making sure that everyone has the common themes and understanding from what was taken away from this united behavior as a leadership team. This is a powerful exercise that can be used not just once or twice, but frequently and ongoing, whether you're in design phase, early implementation, or several years into your learner-centered movement in your district. Pulse checks are an all-the-time behavior that can give you all the time real feedback and insight about progress towards those learner-centered outcomes. Really think about your target questions. And I'm going to leave you with this before we go to the next superpower. Think about this. If your last question, Devin, in conversation to someone is, how can I be a better support for you? What do you think the most important thing you better do as a leader if you ask somebody if you can support them when you walk away? What do you think that would be?
Follow through, Marlon.
Boom. Got to follow through,
Yeah.
right? If you want to enhance the culture of your school system, ask that question, how I can support you, right? That strengthens the desire for staff members to contribute to the culture. You can amplify that culture investment from that staff member by following through. Ask the question and then turn right around and deliver every single time. It shows them that not only did you listen, but you valued what they had to say. So I really want to encourage you in your pulse checks to think about how you might be able to go about that. Superpowers are important. Devin, I know you got several. And which one you got up your sleeve next there, Batman?
All right, next we're going to talk. That's a good one, Marlon. Thank you for sharing. I like the pulse check. Really, really important. I'm going to be talking about human-centered design thinking. And we can go ahead to the next slide. Human-centered design thinking is really a process by which teams come together. They generate innovative solutions through empathy, prototypes, iteration. And this really builds off of what Marlon's been talking about in terms of getting out of the office and doing pulse checks. The very beginning of a design thinking process is really noticing what is the context and how can I create empathy to really understand what's happening in this particular situation. What is the internal experience of the people most affected by this challenge? And that leads you in the cycle of defining and ideation, prototyping, testing, refining, And it's through that process of testing and refining and starting over again that you iterate and you end up generating novel solutions that you would have never thought of if it were not for the intentionality of this process. And I want to point out, we often talk about innovation in schools, and innovation is not just doing things differently. Innovation is doing things differently in a way that makes things better. You have to fundamentally be improving things if you're talking about impactful, meaningful innovation in a learning community. On the next slide, we're going to see some examples of what it looks like when you implement design thinking in action with students, with adults. One of the things that we notice is that we see a lot of flexibility in the settings where design thinking is used, because that helps to generate the context for lots of that ideation, prototyping, rapid design, trying things out, learning by doing. And in a context of rapid change around us, coming back to human-centered design thinking is a really, really powerful approach. On the next slide, you're going to see, let's go ahead to the next one. There's also a lot of interesting research, some of it referenced in the links of the articles on this slide here around the relationship between design thinking and the quality of the relationships that people have. And what we have found in our experience and in the research is that relational trust really matters. And when Marlon was talking about follow through, I had the chance to focus my doctoral research on relational trust and social capital. And what I found was that you have to have 4 elements if you want to have relational trust: consistency, compassion, competence, and communication. And that follow through that he was talking about builds consistency, predictability, reliability. It also builds compassion because you're listening to other people. You are demonstrating competence because you're getting things done. And you're opening up that flow of communication by being responsive to other people's needs. Design thinking has that same transformative power in terms of relational trust. If you're being consistent about using the process, you demonstrate compassion through empathy, through trying to get to better solutions. You end up getting to those outcomes, which is competence. And all throughout, you're communicating, you're listening, and you're expressing yourself. So you can create a culture of vulnerability that helps you to take on bigger and bigger challenges by really embracing human-centered design thinking. And that's a flex that every leader should have at their disposal in a context of rapid change in the world outside of schools. Marlon, drop your next flex.
Next flex. I don't have many left, right? Don't have many left. But I do want to share something that I think really aligns to what Sarah Martinez said, right? Curiosity. Curiosity about how we can find a superpower as a leader that is all about the students. So I want to introduce you to another superpower here about the idea of one more seat, right? The table that you sit at, are you willing to add one more seat to the table for a non-voting student board member? I know this is a common practice out there. I've seen several models that I believe have been very effective. If you currently have a non-voting student board member in your district, if you could just drop any links or resources that you have in your district in the chat, that way our learning community can leverage those. But this is all about creating a system with structures built in that have been co-created with a student to make sure that our system is going to function. I want to encourage you to think about this, not just as any student, but a specific student who's really going to be able to contribute at a very deep level to really catapult the district forward. Think about this student, and I'm stealing this from Kim Smith. She's inspired me from the Center for Inclusive Innovation and Digital Promise. She asks this question all the time, and her and I have conversation. Can you identify the student who you believe is furthest away from the opportunity? Can you create a table at your board at your board meetings where that student is going to serve as your non-voting student board member? Can you create a structure where the student is actually green-lighted to go make a difference? What I mean by that is not to just have a conversation at the board meeting, but for that student to be empowered to go convene other students, to see what's on their minds, so that the voice of the student body can come back to the board, additional inspiration about what happens next. Some examples for you around non-voting student board members across the country, and I know there are plenty of those. We just wanted to share just a couple. You look at this from a Kentucky Board of Education. We have state boards who are now transitioning to this idea of non-voting student board members. You click on those websites for the state of Kentucky, you'll see some models and some documents and some resources that you might be able to use as you consider this in your school districts. I know we've got Dr. Cook on the call from Kentucky. I think I saw him on the list, Devin. Great resource if you want to pluck his brain also. Some other districts that you see there are some documents that they've provided as well. Really want you to think about a couple things to wrap up this idea of this superpower and non-voting student board members on the next slide. What if eligibility was not the question, right? Oftentimes we think the kids have to qualify for some type of opportunity. What if you didn't have to be eligible for it, right? Could you just find that one student? Think about in your board structures or the things that you can do in that agenda structure that ensures that the student's voice is present every single board meeting, not just once a month when you've got your student achievement report, superintendent, even though I did very bad at those back in the day. But can you create a structure where that voice is present all the time? More importantly, at that bottom one there, move this across your district, right? Create those environments, sit alongside the student, and really give them the courage, just like we saw in the chat there, the courage and the curiosity to get out and make a difference. Amplify your community, consider this a leadership position. And when there's tough conversations in those board meetings, give that non-voting student board member a chance to share their thoughts and opinions and see where that takes you as adults in regards to what you believe is next. I know we're getting close to the end, Devin. I know you've got a ton left, but can you give us one more superpower, please?
Yeah, well, building on the idea of, adding a seat, I'm going to share another flex that has tremendous potential to influence change in your community. And that's shifting from dyads, 2 people, into triads, 3 people. So let's go to the next slide. You see visually, if you study social networks or social capital, that if you have 2 people, A and B, you have 1 social connection. If you add 1 person, C, to that mix, all of a sudden you're tripling the number of social connections because you go from 1 to 3. And that has a massive effect on the social structures of your organization. If you're always having pairwise conversations as a leader, you're going to create a centralized network like the one you see on the bottom left, where you're in the middle of each of these conversations. You become what's called an information broker. And that turns out to not be very effective when you're trying to promote meaningful change. What you want to have is more of a decentralized, or even better, a distributed type of model where there are a lot of different connections within your community, so that people are able to share, to benefit from perspectives that are different from their own. That's what really leads to meaningful insights and the most significant growth over time. And there's a ton of research on this that shows that when you have high levels of social connectedness, which by the way requires trust, you see benefits in terms of student achievement on all kinds of metrics. You see higher levels of what they call volunteerism, where people feel more inclined to volunteer their discretionary energy to go above and beyond. And if you're a leader, and I talk about this a little bit in my book, Learner-Centered Leadership, but if you're a leader, what you find is that people generalize their other relationships based on their level of trust that they have for you. So if you're a school principal and you can generate high levels of relational trust from your staff to you as a principal, that's going to affect all sorts of other relationships in your community. If you're a superintendent, the same thing. So leaders have a tremendous responsibility and also a tremendous opportunity to really elevate improvement and outcomes by going back to those 4 elements of relational trust: consistency, compassion, competence, and communication, to build relational trust in your community. And you can extend that dramatically by just adding 1 person to a lot of your conversations. And on the next slide, a couple of specific ways that you can do this. We have a management practice of having one-on-ones with people that report to us. Well, mix it up. Every now and then do a triad instead of just you and 1 direct report. Not only will the rate of learning improve across, but you will see all sorts of other improvements in terms of performance of your group. Marlon talked about using a pulse check, some sort of checklist, but having follow through and ways of building on those interactions is really, really important. And then we've talked a little bit about getting out of the office. If you're going out and you're doing a school visit, bring somebody with you, anybody from your office, and watch how that builds more collective knowledge and more perspective, more insights, and build social capital to help you grow and change as a community, and volunteer to shadow others. We've had a few people in the chat talk about the value of shadowing students. It's fantastic, but go to any of your colleagues and ask them if you can just tag along with them for an hour, a couple of hours, and you will find incredible benefits from this. So shifting from dyads to triads is a really powerful way to dramatically expand social capital in your community that creates the foundation for meaningful change, which is in service to the learners that we hope to serve. So that's my most recent flex. I'm going to turn it back over to Marlon for the next one.
Before we get to flex number 7, if you have any questions, do you want Batman or Robin? Devin, Batman, I'm Robin, just for the record. I just like Robin's outfit, Devin. I'm not sure about you. Something about that mask Batman wore just didn't sit well. If you got any questions, do you want us to entertain? We got a Q&A session coming up here in just a few more minutes. So if you got any questions, please drop those in the chat or put them in the Q&A section of the webinar. We'll try to jump into those here. I want to take just a moment and drop a superpower that we believe is really going to be very meaningful to leaders in our profession. So I want to take a moment and introduce you to this opportunity at Learner Center Collaborative around convening networks. We are proud to say that we've really focused on our North Star, right? Which was putting the learner at the center of all of our conversations. We also know as district leaders and school leaders, we need space to really connect with other leaders who have the same passions and excitements as we do. I'm going to give you one little thing though. In my experience, in talking with other leaders that I've collaborated and colleagues in my network, we've always had conversation about every time we show up, the professional learning is always prepackaged, right? There's a module that we have to go through. There's a content activity that we got to go through. There's always something prepackaged that we have to fit our learning space into that prepackaged experience. So welcome to the idea of learner-centered collaborative connections. These are micro networks of learner-centered teams from different school districts and organizations, all coming together to have a very intimate professional learning experience around common aspirations when it comes to being learner-centered. So here's how it's going to work. We're going to put together a micro network of about 8 to 12 different teams, school districts, organizations. We're going to convene you in a conversation and put you at the table as the learner, and we're going to listen. And there's one commitment that we're going to make to you. We're going to take your learning needs and aspirations, and we're going to put together a professional experience to really amplify those areas through a learner-centered approach. What we can promise you in this one-of-a-kind professional convening, this micro network, what we can promise you is that you're going to get some very good collaboration time and some very deep, intimate networking, because the room is going to be small, not 300 people, getting all the same framework. You're going to interact with several different teams who share those same learning beliefs with you. So there'll be some virtual convenings that we'll have through Zoom sessions, but also we got a unique perspective. We're going to introduce the idea of 2 different site visits to school districts across the country, where you get to go see learner-centered approaches live in action with students in the school. Can you believe that kids are in school these days? So when we get to those site visits, you'll get to see some of those learner-centered approaches in play. You'll see some dynamite examples, and we'd love for you to join us. The one unique attribute in these micro connections that we believe is really going to be very powerful is the opportunity on these site visits to go to industry partner visits as well. Local industry partners who are key players in learner-centered experiences for students and districts are going to partner with us in this connections environment to really amplify what this is all about, what it's going to do for our kids. So we would love to have you join us for an information session on April 4th. We'll give you some slides here in just a few moments, but would love for you to consider going to the website, clicking on the networks drop-down menu, and taking a look at our connections page and thinking about joining the Learner Center Connections Micro Network. We'd love to have you at the table. More importantly, we would love to serve and make sure we fit your learner-centered aspirations and create an experience as one of a kind. It's a superpower, Devin, right? The idea of putting leaders at the table who have ideas about learning, listening, and then customizing that experience very authentically to make sure they get what they need. Learner-centered connections, they're here. We're excited to launch it. More importantly, we would love to have you join us and consider being part of the networks. Devin, that's my last one. I'm gonna let you close us out, the last superpower of the day.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Thank you, Marlon, for sharing that. I'm really excited about the Connections program and the idea that the participants are co-designers of that learning experience. I think is something that's going to lead to all sorts of incredible benefits. I'll tell a quick story. I'm not sure if this has ever happened to anyone else, but when I was a superintendent, I had a very, very supportive school board. We had wonderful relationships, and it was a great team. But occasionally, some of the school board members, trying to be helpful, would tell me how to do certain things, and all with the best of intentions. One of the things that was really clear to me was if I did exactly what they told me to do, I couldn't then own the outcome. The outcome would not be mine. And so I would say to them that you can hold me accountable to the process or the outcome, but not both. And it was a helpful distinction to help us come to consensus around what we were really trying to achieve. And when we think about the importance of clarity of process or outcome, if we're not clear about either, you're not going to be helping anybody as a leader. And if you are only clear about one, and you've kind of misdiagnosed the situation, you can also create a lot of anxiety in that particular interaction or in that context. So let's go ahead to the next slide, please. And one more from here. One of the frameworks that I found really helpful comes from Heifetz, and he's written about adaptive leadership. And he makes this distinction between a technical problem and an adaptive challenge. And a technical problem might be something like the light won't come on. And if the light doesn't come on, it's easy to identify. And there's probably a simple solution. Maybe the bulb needs to be replaced. If not, I could bring in an expert, someone who's an electrician, for example, who could look at the switch or the wiring, and they could diagnose and they could solve that problem. And if I'm a person who wants the light to work, I'm going to be receptive to that technical solution because my interest is get the light to work. That's a very different circumstance than what we face as leaders most of the time, which is an adaptive challenge. So right now I'm seeing all these questions about what do we do about AI in the classroom, and how do we deal with the after effects of the pandemic. And these are things that are very difficult to even identify, and nobody in human history has the complete experience of knowing how to diagnose and solve these adaptive challenges that are changing moment to moment, day to day. And when you encounter an adaptive challenge, it requires the people who have the challenge to come together to try to resolve it. And that kind of goes back to the importance of human-centered design thinking and empathy and expanding the circle and a lot of the things that we've been talking about. But an adaptive challenge also takes a long time to resolve. It's not like turning on a light switch. It takes that process of testing and iteration and getting a little bit better and coming to a partial solution, and then a little better about it. So we are in the context of a lot of adaptive challenge that really compels us to come together to build that relational trust, to use our design thinking superpowers and others to be creative in the face of novel challenges. That's the context that we're in. And that's one of the reasons we have to keep going back to our learners so that we can be grounded in what is most important for us in learning communities. On the next slide is a little bit of, just guidance around what you can do as a leader. First one is to try to really understand, am I confronted with a technical problem? If I am, you could hold people accountable to a process because that process is going to be repeatable and it's going to get us to a predictable type of outcome. But if it's a novel situation and it's an adaptive challenge, then you want to be thinking about how do we bring people together? How do we exercise our ability to work as a community to come up with innovative types of solutions? So being clear for yourself as a leader is going to be helpful for your organization. And just asking this question about, should I be orienting the process or outcome, is a really helpful tool so that we can be most effective in serving others. Because at the end of the day, what we want is for all learners to know themselves, thrive in community, actively engage in the world as their best selves. And in order to do that, we need to be effective at diagnosing our context and coming up with an approach that's going to be most helpful for our learners. So we've shared 8 flexes that we found helpful in the course of our leadership experience. And we're going to do a quick poll. And what we would love to find out from you is, what are the superpowers that you want to flex, that you want to incorporate in your context next? So in a moment, you should see the poll come up, but here you see the 8 that we've gone through: road trips and ride-alongs, clarity of goals, pulse checks, human-centered design thinking, creating another seat, going from dyads to triads, convening networks, and focusing on process or outcome have all been really helpful. And the poll is up, so please go ahead and add your answers. Marlon, anything resonating for you as you think about the 8 that we've reviewed?
I'm just thinking about how it's not about one superpower, Devin. I'm thinking about how all these superpowers equate to a dynamic super leader. And a little bit of everything will have a huge impact on the student's experience. What do you think?
I think you're right. Yeah. I mean, if there was one thing that magically resolved all the challenges we had, we would have already done it, right? So we need to have a lot of different tools. I know you said you weren't a Batman fan, but one of the things that always impressed me about Batman is he had all these tools, and he would, pull them out at just the right moment to address a novel challenge. And so I feel like as leaders, we need to have kind of like a Batman tool, a belt with all the tools on it.
Yep.
And be ready to pull them out at the opportune time to make the biggest difference.
Before you leave that and go to the poll result, I have to ask this question. You talk about tools and belts. Who do you think had a better tool set? Batman's tool belt or Inspector Gadget?
That's a good question.
All that hat, all that stuff came out the hat.
Yeah. This is where my knowledge of pop culture limitations come into play, because I didn't have a TV as a kid, so I read a lot of books, which was really neat, but I didn't get to see a lot of Inspector Gadget. I presume it would be pretty cool to have all of his stuff. And what do you think of these results, Marlon? I'm looking at the poll results, and I see, looks like human-centered design thinking is number 1 at the top of the list, followed by clarity of goals.
Yep. Strong leadership, right, is going to center on that the future framework, the North Star for your district. So super proud of the space to have like-minded folks all centering around what's going to happen next, down the road, and for the future. Love it.
That's right. All right. I think we're going to go to some Q&A next. And so if you have a question, we would love to have you drop it into the chat so that we can, see what's on your mind as a participant. We have a lot of great comments, by the way. Thank you, Dan, for sharing frameworks, and we've got some ideas about shadowing. Dan is a man after my own heart, also, quoting Margaret Wheatley, one of my favorite authors. But what questions are on your mind? Let's see what pops up in the chat here. As you're typing in questions, some of you are also good at multitasking. Really encourage you to follow our website, sign up for our newsletters. We share lots of tools and try to showcase bright spots and best practices that we're seeing out in the field. Lots of ways to also connect with us through social media. And we really hope that, this is the beginning of a conversation and look forward to staying connected. So hopefully you'll be able to sign up for those. And
Debbie, do you mind if I ask you a question?
Go for it.
And I don't know if you'll toss it back and make me give an answer or not, just knowing how you roll there, Batman. All those superpowers, how do I have time I'm running a school district, I'm running a school, I'm running a big organization. We've got somebody here from a state department of education. How in the world do I have time to do all 8 or even some of these superpowers you shared?
Well, I do have an answer, but I am going to do the Batman thing, and I'm going to, boomerang it back to you because I want to hear your thoughts first, and then I'll add some commentary.
I like to have fun with answers, right? I believe sometimes you got to take the bottom 350 emails in your inbox and you got to delete those bad boys. Sometimes it's about what's important. Is it that inbox, or is it about those that you serve? And any superhero focuses on the people that they serve, which means you got to get out and interact with the people. So my response: delete the bottom 350 emails 4 times a year. Leverage that time to get out and just interact with people and listen. That's how. And if it's important for you to listen to those that you serve, you'll be able to serve them a lot better. That's my fun answer, Devin. How about you?
Well, I love that. I love that. And the email one just, makes me chuckle. But yeah, what I would say to leaders is you're in charge, right? So it's up to you. No one's going to come and figure it out for you. So you need to, use your time wisely and schedule the things that are going to be most impactful. And I know when I was a superintendent, I had a practice which I incorporated from a superintendent friend of mine, which was 2 days a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'd go visit schools, and it was just part of my routine practice. And if I didn't schedule that first, that time would have been filled up with emails and all sorts of other things. But it's really up to you as a leader to set the tone and spend your time on those things that are going to be most impactful. And proximity and serving those around you is it's got to be near the top of your list.
Yeah. Great superintendent to model yourselves after. Superintendent Brian Troop, who's on the call today from Effort of Schools up in Pennsylvania. Not just him, but his entire team really models that behavior of being out to engage with intention. Great resource there. Again,
there's a good question here, Marlon, about how to create a sense of urgency for others around some of the changes that are needed. What comes to mind when you hear that question?
2 things super fast, right? It's all about your guiding coalition, right? If that guiding coalition is strong, empowered, right, and driven with purpose, then you've got a group of leaders, like-minded leaders, all trying to figure out how to better serve the district. But the urgency does not come from the superintendent, does not come from the principal, it does not come from one leader. It comes from that guiding coalition. So I would encourage you to think learner-centered on this approach, Devin. Really charge that guiding coalition with coming up with how they're going to create that urgency. A district or a school building behavior, right? Have those communication behaviors that generate clarity around the urgency established by your guiding coalition.
Yeah, love it. Also feel like exposure is really important. Help people to see what's happening in a way that creates that sense of empathy and understanding. Sometimes that is getting outside of your own environment and seeing things in other places so that you understand the gap between what's happening in your environment and other communities. And in other cases, it's getting grounded, really getting close to students. So this is great. We appreciate the questions. If we haven't been able to answer your question, please, email it to us. And, we'll be happy to respond. As I said, we're also easy to find online. You can send us a message at the email here or through social media. We'll be happy to engage. And Marlon's going to close us out. So take it away, Marlon.
Sure thing. And Dr. Fisher posted a question about networks. I know our next slide is going to give you a little bit more detail about it. I want to invite you to come out to an information session on April the 4th at 9 a.m. PT. Or 12 o'clock p.m. Eastern time, depending on where you live out in the country. We're just going to give you a very good overview and a deep dive around this idea of learner-centered connections, aka micro networks. We're going to dig in for about 45 minutes. We know you're busy this time of year, but if you're interested in any deep information, check us out. Applications are going to open up in that window that you see there. We are targeting early June to convene our first micro network, to listen and start that learner-centered design concept and co-create over the summer. We're going to kick off our first micro network for the 23-24 school year with a number of virtual convenings, 2 in-person convenings as well. So Dr. Fisher, your question in the chat, you can get those resources on the website or social media, but to give you a sense of timeline and when some of those events are going to happen, we're starting to line up. Hope to see you on April 4th. If not, reach out to me at marlon@learnercenter.org. Shoot me an email. Happy to schedule some time one-on-one with you and just talk about how micro networks might better serve the district. I want to appreciate everybody for coming out today. Again, busy time of the year. You've got some superpowers, Devin. I know you got some pretty strong superpowers. I would roll around with you any day to serve and make a difference. More importantly, to everyone who came out, you got superpowers as well. And just know that the team here at Learner Center Collaborative is all about standing alongside of you to serve our communities. I want to thank you for joining us today. We've had a great conversation. Really appreciate you being here. Keep spreading those superpowers. Keep amplifying those powers. More importantly, keep investing those superpowers in the kids that are walking the halls of your schools and walking around in your neighborhoods to make sure they've got opportunities to contribute to their communities and live their authentic selves. We're here at Learner Center Collaborative. Honored you spent your time with us. Wish you the best of luck as you close out your school year. Enjoy graduation. It's the best moment of the school year. I know it's right around the corner, so make sure you enjoy the moment. Thanks for being here today. Feel free to join us sometime soon here at our next webinar. Be on the lookout for that and take a look at us at www.learnercenter.org. Keep doing what you do. Excited you spent time with us today, and keep focusing on those kids. Thanks for coming today. Devin, you did fantastic. I got to say that, man. It was a blast. Have fun.
Thank you, Marlon. Great job. Thank you, everybody.